Welcome back to the afternoon sessions of the ELT Week Peru 2026. We are very happy to have you join us again, and we really hope you are enjoying the session so far. We have a quick reminder. Safeguarding is a priority for the British Council, so you are welcome and encouraged to share your comments and questions, making sure that you maintain respectful and positive communication, and remembering not to share any personal or sensitive information. Please note that harmful, violent, or inappropriate comments will not be tolerated, and you can report a concern through the QR code we are showing on screen. Our goal is to enrich your teaching practice and provide tools for the betterment of the education in your context. Our next speaker is Yedith Monroy Segundo from Mexico. Are there some Mexican teachers right now? Well, I would like to introduce her. She is an experienced English teacher with 25 years of work across diverse educational settings, from young learners to university students. She holds a master's degree and a doctorate in education and is deeply committed to reflective practice and ongoing research. Her interests include classroom interaction, teacher development, and content-responsive pedagogy. She has presented at national and international conferences and remains dedicated to connecting research with everyday teaching practice. Welcome, Yedith.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this nice presentation, Giselle. And thank you for the British Council for the opportunity and for having these events for sharing and learning. So today I want to present the title of this presentation, Clear, Concise, Effective, Mastery Instructions for Better Learning. And I hope you have a very nice time hearing me. So I would like you to participate in the chat with your comments and your opinions, and also provide your ideas. Okay, guys. So today we're going to explore something that seems very, very simple, but that has a profound impact on everything that happens in our classrooms. The way we give instructions and the way we check that our students truly understand them. In my experience, many classroom management problems are not actually are not actually behavior problems. They are mostly instruction problems. When the students are confused, they disengage. And when they disengage, we lose the learning time. When we lose the learning time, frustration increases, not only for students, but also for us as teachers. So today I invite you to reflect on our own classroom practice, to analyze how we give instructions, the habits that we have when we give instructions, and to leave today's sessions with concrete and practical tools so that we can apply them immediately. When we hear the phrase classroom management, we often think about discipline, all the structure that we have in the classroom. But today I would like to redefine classroom management as learning facilitation, how we organize this classroom and all the activities and the routines and the materials in order to provide our students with these environments to facilitate the way they are learning and the way they are grasping this information. Classroom management is about maximizing learning time and cognitive engagement. If students clearly understand what to do, how to do it, and why they are doing it, transitions from one activity to another activity become smoother. Yes, the students' participation increases because they are going to feel comfortable in a safe environment, and their autonomy is going to grow. So we as teachers, we have a very important role in organizing this activity for our students. However, If students are unsure about the task, they don't feel they feel nervous about the task, because sometimes the tasks that we organize are in English, and their English level is not as we expect, so they become nervous, they start developing this anxiety. So if our students experience all of these sensations, they, even if we have a very well designed activity, we are not going to have the results that we expect. So this activity can fail. So we have to be very careful when giving instructions. So effective instructions are not a minor teaching skill. They are central to pedagogical effectiveness. Sometimes we think that the activity is not working because we didn't consider several aspects, but sometimes we don't consider the way we give these instructions. Okay, so let's see. Unclear instructions increase four major problems in our classroom. The first one is the cognitive load. When we overload the students with too many words, complex sentences, or multiple steps at once, we exceed their working memory capacity, especially in these students which the English is not the first language. So especially in this context where we teach English as a foreign language. So the second problem, it's off-task behavior. For example, when students don't understand what to do, they often start doing something else. We give an instruction, and then as they don't understand, they start looking for something else to do, or they get distracted easily. Okay. Another problem is that students' anxiety increases. Confusion creates insecurity, particularly for these learners with a low proficiency. And the other problem that I have also identified is the teacher talking time. We speak, and our students, they don't understand anything. So when instructions are unclear, we repeat them several times. And if they are not understanding how we give these instructions, we try to rephrase the instruction. Okay. And if the students don't understand with the instruction and with the rephrase, so we try to explain again, but now individually. So just pointing at the students that are asking for questions. And obviously, this is going to consume valuable minutes. So it's going to be very difficult to get students' attention if we are attending each one individually for explaining the same thing or for delivering the same instruction. So small instructional inefficiencies multiply quickly. If when a student doesn't understand, he's going to raise the hand and is going to ask for clarification. And then another student is going to ask again for a clarification on another aspect. So we have to be very, very careful with this time. Okay. Let's consider now some common challenges. The first one is ambiguity. When we assume that students understand implicit expectations, so we think that when we ask them to fill a chart, so we know that everybody has already filled a chart in previous classes or with previous teachers. So when we are here with this activity, we need to make sure that all of them know how to fill in a chart. So over-explaining, we provide too much detail at once, and probably we are overwhelming our students with this kind of instruction. So we have to be to take some time so that the students understand and comprehend what is the task about. Another one is the language overload. We use vocabulary or grammar structures that are above our students' English level. Something that I always recommend is to use cognates so that the students get familiarized with the words that we're using in the instructions. And with some time, they are going to start acquiring this kind of vocabulary, and it's going to be easier for them to understand the instructions, because there is a pattern from class to class that we as teachers, we try to use the same vocabulary. So they get familiar with this, and they acquire it. So the activities are easier for them to understand, at least the process. And then sometimes we also give instructions while the students are still distracted. So one activity to do is to ask students to pay attention for the moment when giving instructions. Of course, there are going to be many things that they are going to be doing, but at least 1 minute so that everybody is focused on what we say. What is, I would like you to briefly reflect, just write on the comments, what is your most frequent challenge when giving instruction? It can be the use of vocabulary, that you have a lot of students asking for questions. Another important challenge can be that there is a large class, and they are very active and they don't pay attention. So please write on the chat, what is your most frequent challenge when giving instructions? Remember that often this awareness in this first step, it's the first way to start making improvements. If I don't reflect on the way that I give instructions, I will continue doing the same. And if I continue doing the same, I will have the same results. So what we have, or what we need now, is to think, how are we developing in our classes, how are we acting in the classes, so that identify those challenges with our students. For example, the teacher says distracted students. Yes, that is a challenge, and it doesn't have to do with us, but many times with the activities that we plan. So we have very distracted students. When the class is online and the students don't find the page in their books exactly, yes, we're going to see some tips for working online classes and having this giving instruction tips useful also for that environment. When the students are not explicit about what they don't understand when told the instructions, and they say, please repeat everything because I didn't understand anything. Okay, thank you so much. And real beginners, especially adults in the first course, they take English 0 or English A1 minus. Okay, yes. So these are some challenges that we face every day. Okay. Thank you very much for your participations, teachers. So as you know, as we can see now, what happens in Peru, it happens also in Mexico, it happens in other parts of the world. So mostly our classes and our students are pretty much the same. And the problems that we face are is really similar. So that's why I wanted to focus on this, because even though we have a few years or many years of teaching experience, generations are different, and nowadays we have we have students which are very difficult to engage. So that's why I want to focus today in giving instructions. Students prefer reading instructions than listening to them. Very good. Yes, because if they don't pay attention to the teacher, so they know that they are going to have the written information for any time they need it or they want to look at it. Thank you so much. So now let's talk about checking understanding. How often do we say, do you understand? And what do our students say? Yes, yes. In a current repetition, everybody says, yes, teacher, yes, I understood clearly. But how often, but then when the activity starts and they have to start doing the activity, the questions appear. Yes, teacher, what did you say? Teacher, are we going to be working in the book? Teacher, are we going to copy? So those are very, very, very common problems. So, or something that also happens is that they start doing the activity, but they do something else that was not required. Okay, so we have this, do you understand? So it's not a reliable diagnostic tool. Do you understand? too ambiguous that students can say yes just to make the teacher be quiet, but the activity is not going to be accomplished. Okay, so effective comprehension checking must require students demonstrate understanding, not simply declare it. So they can say yes, but in the moment of working or in the moment of developing the activity, they are not going to know what to do. Okay, so in that moment, we're going to have these difficulties. Okay, so clear instructions support predictability, autonomy, and participation. I was telling you before that when we use the same verbs or verbs that are cognates for giving instructions, our students are going to become familiar, and they, little by little, they are going to acquire that vocabulary. So they are going to know, they are going to be familiar with what is match the columns. Okay, they are going to be familiar with underline the verbs. Yes, and but that is going to be a process, little by little. So predictability reduces anxiety. When my students know which verbs I'm going to be using, so they know that they know this vocabulary, and they know what is the activity about, and they know what they have to develop. Okay, so they feel safe, they feel secure in the classroom, and they start they, at least they are going to be feel motivated because they are understanding. Okay, in that moment their autonomy is going to increase because they are going to be feel safe by developing the activity. So that they can support other students which are not really which haven't understood the activity. Okay, in that moment when they feel safe, when they are supporting other students, their participation improves, their engagement improves, so they are going to feel more committed to the task because they are understanding. Okay, so these clear instructions are structured, they are concise, they can be supported visually or through modeling. That is something very important that we can implement in our classes, to start modeling the instructions, and they are confirmed before the task begins. We once we have given the instructions, we need to model the activities to make sure that the students or most of the students have understood what to do, and then let the students work, so that everybody knows what to do, and that they know their expectations, your expectations as teacher. So this leads us to the practical framework that I want to share nowadays. It's this one, it's instruction model of the 3S. The first one is saying the instruction. The second one is showing. We have to model the instruction for our students. And the third one is simplify. Okay, this model is simple, but I think it's also powerful. It structures how we deliver instructions so that they are cognitively manageable and pedagogically effective. So now let's have a look at each component. So the first step is say. When giving instructions, we need to use short sentences, okay? One instruction at a time. And of course, highlight key action verbs. For example, instead of saying, what I would like you to do now is work collaboratively with your partner to analyze the dialogue and answer the comprehension questions below. I need to take some air because I need to breathe deeply because the instruction is too long. Okay, so now we need to practice how can we say this one but using this first principle: short sentences, one instruction at a time, and highlight these action verbs. So for example, it can be like this: work with a partner. Okay, now we ask the students to work with a partner, or we assign the pairs, okay, the partners. So once they are in pairs, we continue with the second step or with the second instruction. Okay, so now we provide the paper and we give them read the dialogue, or if the dialogue is in a book, so we need to, open your book on page 26. Once they have opened your book, you can say, okay, guys, so please show me your book, show me the page, and students are going to show like this. Okay, so now once that you have made sure that everybody is on the page that you wanted to be, so now you can give the next instruction. Okay, read the dialogue. What is the dialogue? And the students are going to start saying the boy and the girl, or the one that is in the restaurant, etc. Some ideas. Okay, so now once they have finished reading the dialogue, so then you can go to the next section. Answer questions 1 to 5. And obviously, before answering questions 1 to 5, if you want to make sure that they have understood the vocabulary, or if you want to focus on one specific expression or grammatical structure, so you guide the group into that. But if there is nothing like that, so you can ask them to go and answer the questions from 1 to 5. Okay, so notice the difference. We have this very long sentence, and then we have the same instruction, but now with short sentences, with clearer verbs, and with sequence steps. So in this moment, we can understand that clarity is kindness in teaching, because sometimes our students might feel that the teacher is speaking very fast, the teacher is speaking only in English, and I don't understand. The teacher, I asked him or asked her one question, and he or she didn't clarify, and is being very rude, okay? Or the teacher is very, how can we say, well, it's very rude because he doesn't explain, or he goes very fast, and I am low learner, or I cannot do it, I don't like English, and I'm not going to do it, because I have students like those ones, and they say, okay, no, I'm not going to do it because I didn't understand anything. So we have to reflect on the way that we give our instructions. Okay, so and consider that our students are very sensitive, so we have to be kind with them. Okay, so the next one is show. The second step is show. Demonstrate the task. For example, in this case, we can use a volunteer, one of our students, the ones that are really outgoing, that have a very good English level, so they can be working as volunteers, and we can model the instructions with them, or model a think aloud instruction, or provide also visual examples. Research consistently shows that demonstration reduces misunderstanding, and it provides more effective results rather than repeated explanations. Okay, if a student see what the task looks like, they process expectations more efficiently. Instead of repeating instructions 3 times, for example, demonstrate it once. Okay, so it's going to save time, it's going to be clearer, more students are going to commit to the task, and the pace of the class is going to be better. Okay. The next one, the third step is simplify. Check language difficulty. When we are giving instructions, it's advisable to explain the verb that we're going to be using, or that we're going to be implementing. Probably there is a verb that we haven't used before, and it's important to use it, so we need to clarify that students know that verb. Okay, so remove unnecessary words. Sometimes we want to sound like more polite or more interesting for giving long instructions or complicated instructions, and the only thing that happens is that we confuse our students. And use high frequency vocabulary. So I was telling you, the vocabulary that you use for giving instructions, try to repeat them one session after another session, so that students become familiar with this. And when pedagogical, and sometimes we must use the mother tongue in order to provide an explanation of something that it's really hard for them to understand, but that's going to be pedagogically justified. Okay, Using the first language is not a failure, okay, of methodology. It can be a cognitive bridge. What I tell my students is that when they are going to give instructions to their classmates, in my case, with that our our native language is Spanish. So Spanish is the last resource. Okay, first you have other resources: body language, visuals, exemplifying, providing models, etc. But Spanish is the last resource. It's not that you cannot use it, but just to try some other resources first than Spanish. Okay, so simplifying doesn't mean lowering expectations, not in the activity or our students. It means lowering linguistic barriers so that the students' cognitive effort is directed towards the learning objectives. Okay. Um, so I hope that you are having great ideas in here. So now I invite you to reflect, how does using your first language help or limit, because sometimes it also limits students when trying to understand instructions. Okay, I think that in limiting, it's when we limit, when our mother tongue limits our understanding of instructions or anything, is that our students rely on the mother tongue, so they don't make this effort like trying to understand or trying to grasp the vocabulary they have seen in previous sessions, because they say, no, don't worry, my teacher is going to explain it in English at the end, so don't worry. So I think that is the biggest limitation for me. But I want to read your comments. So how does using your first language help or limit students when trying to understand instructions? So let's share some ideas. Exactly, teacher. To ask students to speak as much English as they can, even if it's not grammatically correct. Perfect. So providing a safe environment when the mistakes or the errors are not punished, but also everybody can learn from that. So it can benefit our students. So thank you so much, teacher. In some contexts, the use of mother tongue clarification saves time and reduces these students' anxiety. In others, of course, the excessive reliance might reduce the exposure to this English. So they rely on Spanish and they say, I'm not going to make the effort because the teacher is going to say or is going to repeat in Spanish at the end. So the key balance is this professional judgment. Sometimes it's it's a benefit to use this mother tongue. It helps when they say a verb for the first time exactly, for example, with match, that it's not a cognate and that it's very useful and very used in the English classes. Thank you so much, teacher. Definitely, it limits students. Okay, yes, it's a limitation. Okay, but it's not prohibited to use the mother tongue. Okay, so let's see. Now that we have discussed how to give instructions, let's explore how to check understanding effectively. Okay, so remember, checking understanding is formative assessment. It informs our next instructional decision. If my students is not understanding the instruction or the activity or the task, so I'm going to design or redesign the activities of the lesson plan for the next session. So that's why I said that is formative assessment, not only for the students, but also for us as teachers on what we are doing in the classes. Okay? So providing a list of words to make them understand the meaning exactly at the first, when we have the first days of the year or the class or the semester, we can provide the students with a glossary of the verbs, the vocabulary that's going to be very frequent used in the classes. Perfect. Thank you so much, teacher. So one technique is student restatement. For example, one asks learners to repeat the instructions in their own words, obviously in English, but repeat not the whole expression, but repeat one or two words that are key for understanding or for developing the task. For example, we can ask our students, okay, what is the first step? So the students can give you the information. How many questions do you have to answer? Okay, it's one question, two questions, or the whole content. Okay, are you writing or speaking? Yes, for clarifying what kind of activity or which skill do we have to use. If a student can accurately restate the task, comprehension is likely sure, okay, is likely secure. If not, we clarify before the activity begins. So if we see that we are asking these clarifying questions and students look like they're still confused, so we continue with a clarification, a modeling activity, and then the activity begins, okay, not before. Okay. Yes, teacher. For example, the teacher says, I consider we should explain the English instructions in a simple way without depending on our native language, because it is crucial that students can familiarize using the language learned perfectly. Exactly. And sometimes what I used to do is to provide with some visuals of common activities in the classroom so that they can pronounce it and they can use them to communicate into the classroom. How do you say in the black space in English? Can you repeat, please? Teacher, could you please give me an example of? And as they see it in the classroom every day, so they know that they have to communicate in the classroom. So, but that's in the first or second session of the course, and so that they get familiarized with this and they feel safe when using them in the class. It is important to distinguish between instruction focused and questions and content questions. Okay, instruction focused is, for example, are you working alone or in pairs? And are you speaking or writing? Okay. And in this instruction focused question, this content question is, what is the main idea of the text? What are the verbs that we are going to be underlining? Okay, so we are going to have these two different questions: instruction focused questions, which is related to the activity, and the content questions according to the grammar, according to the reading, according to the content of the listening task. Okay, so both, in this case, both activities or both questions are important. But if students don't understand the task structure, the instructions for developing the activity, so the content questions or the content, it's going to become more difficult for them to get. So we must first secure procedural clarity, and then we can focus on the content that we're going to be developing. Okay? So the next one, it's non-verbal checks. For example, non-verbal checks are especially useful in large or multilingual classrooms. Um, for example, when we ask them for an activity and we want to clarify, one technique could be thumbs up or thumbs down if they understand or if they don't understand. Okay, mini whiteboards. Students can have a mini whiteboard and they can write in here one question or a word, or raise their hand when they have a question, and then you can see their blackboard that they are using. Okay. Number cards, for example, if we are using, for example, questions, so we can provide them with cards, or they can do their own cards and they can raise their card according to the question or the doubt that they have. So these kind of activities allows rapid data collection. What is the doubt? What is the question that they are having? What they are not understanding? And this also encourages their participation. They reduce this linguistic procedure. Probably, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I write it on the whiteboard, and then I ask for the teacher. When the teacher visualizes that I am writing my whiteboard with one word, so the teacher notices that I have a question on the meaning, pronunciation, or the usage of one word. So nonverbal strategies also empower these learners which are very shy, very quiet in the classroom, that are not very outgoing, yes, so that we can approach these students and we can support them. Okay, so quick formative routines consolidate understanding. For example, we can have a 30-second summary. After we have given these instructions, we can ask one student to summarize what we have already said. Okay? An exit ticket, for example, we can ask our students to probably you have green tickets or red tickets if they have or if they have understood the activity, so they can take a green ticket. If they haven't understood the activity or the task, so they can grab a red ticket so that they have to wait for to be clarified. And these techniques provide evidence of comprehension and guide future planning. Formative checking, in this case, is not interrupting the way that our students are learning, but it's also learning, okay? When they ask something that they don't know, they are learning. When they ask for clarification of something that they haven't understood, they are also learning, okay? So I hope everything it's being clear. I don't want to be speaking like very fast, but I hope you have you're grabbing all these ideas. So now I would like you to think about this. How many alternatives can you generate instead of asking, do you understand? How many other ways can you think of instead of using do you understand? Could you please write on the chat some of your ideas? How can we change this classic do you understand? Okay, yes, sometimes it is necessary to use the native language to explain. Very good. Exactly, teacher. Both are relevant, the questions for the task and the questions for understanding the content. Yes. Are we clear? Okay. Are we clear? We also have this. We can also have this. Yes. Okay. Everybody's going to say yes. Yes, we're clear. Okay. What is clear? What is clear? What is not clear? Okay. Looking for a specific aspect on the instruction exactly. Did you get the idea? What do you have to do now exactly? And then we push our students to restate the instruction that we have already given. What are you going to do so they can summarize this idea? Okay. Did I make myself understandable? Exactly, because sometimes the instruction is clear, but when we say the instruction, we mix our tongue, we get nervous, and we use different vocabulary. So probably we are not making clear ourselves. Okay. Exactly. Could you explain the task? Exactly. And those ones who are very outgoing or very have a good English level, they are going to try to explain the task in front of the class. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Okay, guys. So we can ask what do you do first? Okay, what do you do first? Okay, how much time do you have? If we say we're going to have 5 minutes for reading the dialogue, and then we can say how much time do you have for reading the dialogue, and then the students can say 5 minutes, teacher. Okay, so what happens after you finish? And then somebody can say answer questions from 1 to 5, so and so on. Okay. Thank you so much. So replacing one habitual questions can transform our classroom. Okay, so let's see. Contextual adaptations. Now let's consider the context, okay? No strategy works identically in every classroom. Sometimes we have the same class, but with different groups, okay? And what works with group A probably is not going to be working with group B. And something what works with when we work this class with group A, something happened that make us modify the lesson plan. And when we start working with group B, everything becomes better because we had the previous experience. So and that's okay. So change requires intentional practice. Small adjustments produce measurable improvements. If something that didn't work well in group A, if I don't modify it, if I apply it the same way in group B, so probably I'm going to have the same problems. It's not going to work as it didn't work in group A. So if we don't make this conscious, we're going to go to the next class with the same problems and we're going to have the same low results. So let's acknowledge, talking about this, so let's acknowledge some of these challenges, okay? These challenges, for example, what about working with large classes? We have classes 45, 55, maybe 60 students in one classroom, and we're not going to be speaking all the time, okay? So it's important to use visuals, appoint to student leaders, or employ these choral responses, okay? For example, in multilingual classrooms, I have had the opportunity of working in multilingual classrooms, and of course, there is. We have to allow their strategy, the use of mother tongue, so that they feel safe when asking for their doubts. And in this case, we can pair these stronger students in the language with the ones that are just emerging, okay? And another context of this is limited technology context, okay? We cannot project everything. We cannot use these slides for projecting the instructions or projecting the activities, but we can have the use of these paper visuals, board sequences, or use also reusable instruction cards. And for online or hybrid teaching, we can have a model task before sending the students to the breakout rooms, or once they they are in the breakout room, so we can use the chat in order to send the instruction or provide a picture with the expected outcome, okay? Or before sending them, share the screen in order to demonstrate the task. So adaptation, remember, adaptation is our professionalism in action, okay? So problems can happen, but we need to adapt. We need to adapt, okay? So now, in order to conclude this session, I'm very happy for this time. So in order to conclude, let's see, some small challenges in teacher language, for example, sequencing, interaction patterns, they make significantly improvements in our lesson flow and provide lesson autonomy for our students. Clear instructions reduce cognitive overload. Effective checking ensures understanding, structured routines increase confidence. And I want to ask you something, okay? Tomorrow, I encourage you to implement just one change from the ideas that we have given in here, that we have that are also in the chat. Please think about how you can make a implement just one change, okay? Probably shorten your instructions, probably adding a demonstration, probably replacing this "do you understand" with a targeted question, okay? And let's observe the difference, okay? Let's see if we feel better in classes, if our students grasp the information faster, or how they feel. And we can also ask our students, okay, how did you notice, what did you notice today in the class? What was different from this class and the others that we have been sharing? So if we implement one change at a time, believe me, teachers, we are going to improve our classroom management practice, okay? So there is nothing else to do now, so just Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your attention and your professional engagement. Thank you very much for all the comments, the ideas that you have shared here in the chat. Thank you so much. And if you would like to continue the conversation, collaborate, or share classroom experiences, please feel free to contact me. Teaching is complex. I know it. I have been living for 25 years with this complexity, but clarity, remember, clarity makes it manageable, okay? And clear instructions create better learning. We cannot have great results if we don't start since the beginning, giving instructions clearly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, British Council. Thank you so much, Giselle. Now I think it's the question and answer time. So thank you so much.
No, thanks to you, Yeri. That was an incredibly useful presentation. And now we will open the floor for a few questions from the audience. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat and I will read them. Well, while we are waiting for the questions, I have one myself, and it's about the 3S model that you presented. I was wondering if this 3S model be used as it is, or are there ways teachers could adapt it, especially for students that need more time to process instructions, especially for those with different processing speeds or learning needs?
Yes. Well, I was telling you that we can ask our students in the diagnosis. We notice which students have a higher English level, a higher processing thinking skills, and we can pair our students with these students which need more support, more engagement, some help every class. We can pair this stronger student with these emerging students. We can also provide our students with examples or models of speaking, how to develop the task before they develop the activity. So we are these students which need more support. Monitor, always monitor them when giving the instructions and when they are developing the task, because when we don't pay attention to these students, their motivation decreases, their interest and commitment in the class is we lose their interest and commitment in the class. So it's very important for them to be considered in the activities.
Great. So what you just explained would also answer the question, what do you do for inclusive students like autism?
We can use some visual aids, or we can use also this glossary, so that the students, we can have this glossary, the word, the picture, and an example, and so that the students can become familiar with this.
Great. We have another question. What techniques work best for giving instructions to large groups of young learners?
I would say that rephrasing the instruction, okay? When we give the instruction, we can ask the students, what are we going to do? Okay, so, and then the students are going to be saying the instructions as they understood, because you cannot ask individually. So when we have a large class, we can ask, okay, did you understand what are we going to do? And they are going to say yes. And then, okay, what are we going to do? Step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and we can write on the board like the task, but in short verbs. So the students visualize the activity development in short verbs.
Great. How to maintain interest in a long class? Well, more or less the answer. Let's see. How to manage activities like a classroom survey when they have to gather info from different classmates for online students if classes are hybrid?
In this case, we can start developing this skill of using online documents. Okay, there is some documents that we can edit online, so everybody can be writing on the same paper. Yes, there is also that option, and yes, editing online.
Awesome. Well, I don't see more questions. Another from me. What are some ways teachers can check students' understanding of instructions while keeping the lesson flowing? Not having the lesson disturbed, but flowing.
Exactly, without interrupting. Well, we can have this student restatement. For example, once they are working in the activity, of course, we are not going to interrupt the activity for answering the question to one student, but we can approach to this student or to this team where they have the question or where they have this doubt, and we can explain again. That's why it's very important to monitor when we assign an activity, even if it's a short or a long activity, individual or in pair. Always having a monitoring or walking around the classroom in order to see that our students are on task and that they are doing what it's intended to do. So it's important. I always like to monitor my students' activities by walking around the classroom and observing their task. And if they are working in teams, I stand next to one team and hear and listen to what they are doing, what they are commenting, what are the questions they are asking each other. And if it's something relevant, I interrupt the activity in the team, but I don't interrupt the activity in the classroom, so that I want to clarify something in the activity so that they can continue working. But yes, that's what I do, monitoring when the activity is already being developed.
Great. We have another question. It says, would you clarify the term sequencing in class?
Would you would clarify the term sequencing in class? Okay, sequencing, I use it when the activity or the task has several steps. Okay, so for example, I was telling you at the first, okay, get into pairs, open your book on page number 15, read the dialogue of Lucy and Mark, and answer questions from 1 to 5. Okay, so that's the whole activity. But sequencing, it's okay. Pairs, book, dialogue, questions. So I sequence the activity, the same instructions into 4 steps. So that's why how I use sequencing.
Awesome. What kind of visual material can we use to make sure young adults and students understood instructions?
For example, visual material for ovals. It can be like this thumbs up. For example, the icons from Facebook. The thumbs up, it's like when they have understood. The thumbs down when they don't understand. And some emojis for a question mark, for example, when they have a question, and for providing feedback also. I also use this checklist also with images rather than with sentences. Yes, that's what I try to do with others.
Awesome. Well, I think we don't have more questions, so maybe it's time to bring this session to an end. So thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you very much, Jedit, for all the enriching information you've given us today. Before the session ends, please, teachers, educators, if you were not able to join us live in the past sessions, you can watch the recording later on YouTube. And also, well, we will take a short break until 5 p.m. and then please stay around. See you shortly. Thank you,
Thank you
Jedit.
so much. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, teachers.
Bye.
Welcome back. Welcome back to all of you, and thank you all for your active participation throughout today's sessions. It has been an incredibly productive day of learning and collaboration. To bring our ELT Week second day to a close, let's welcome María Esther Linares. María Esther Linares is head of the English department at San Antonio de Padua School, and she is also external advisor to two different schools, one La Recoleta School in Arequipa, and the other one San Antonio de Huamanga in Ayacucho. With over 40 years of experience in English language teaching, she specializes in teacher training, curriculum design, assessment, and bilingual education. She holds a master's degree in TEFL from the University of Reading in the UK, and a diploma of overseas teachers of English from the Royal Society of Arts. María Esther is also a certified Cambridge Assessment Speaking Examiner, and she actively supports the promotion of high standards in language proficiency and also classroom-based assessment. Let's give María Esther a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, for your patience. Thank you, British Council, for giving me this opportunity. Okay, this is a scenario where we are going to talk about assessment. Assessment is a term that all of us use. And sometimes we feel that this is a workload. But let's try to see today that it is not as we think it is, okay? My agenda is divided into 4 parts. First, we're going to rethink assessment. We're going to look for assessment for learning, which is my proposal. Then we're going to collect evidence of learning, and then we're going to go from evidence to action. Thank you. Okay, why do we need to rethink assessment? Because it is a crucial area. Yes. So in order to answer this question, I want you to answer this question. There's going to be a poll. There's going to be a reflection, and I'm going to promise you something. Okay? Let's see. What is my question? Please tell me, how much does grading contribute to your weekly stress? Could you write your answers in the chat, please? How much does grading contribute to your weekly stress? A lot, not much, how much? What do you think? A lot, very little? Yes or no? Okay. I'm going to tell you that it contributes to my weekly stress a lot. And look at this. This is a picture. Okay, look. Is this picture familiar to you? Yes. I think that we're always surrounded by quizzes, exams, assignments, presentations, etc. Yeah, but why are we doing this? Because we are becoming auditors. Yeah, we are more interested in numbers, we're interested in figures. And what about coaching, which is really the core of assessment? So we are auditing the past instead of coaching the future. I'm going to promise that today, okay, we are going to change this vision of assessment into something different. So what is the proposal that I have for you? The proposal is assessment for learning. We're so used to assessment of learning. But today, let's think a little bit more on assessment for learning as formative assessment. We're going to look at the core pillars of assessment for learning, and we're going to look at the cycle diagram that is important. Okay? So what is assessment of learning? Assessment of learning is what it checks what has been learned. The end of the school year summative assessment. And what is assessment for learning? Assessment for learning is the one that is going to help the students learn better while they are learning. When learning is happening, it's every day. It's an everyday process. So why do we need to wait until the end of the term, the end of the bimester, the end of the school year? Okay, so we need to do it little by little. Yeah. So this assessment for learning, which is the proposal, it has got what we call some pillars, okay? 5 core pillars. First, we need to create clear learning intention. Students need to know what they are learning and why they are learning. The second core pillar is clear success criteria. They need to know how successful they are going to be, how they are going to be assessed, and how they are going to be held by the teacher. And what is the teacher going to do? The teacher needs to elicit classroom questions, different classroom questions, different techniques. Okay, from the very first moment when the students come to class, there's going to be a question. Good morning, how are you? That answer is going to be part of this. Feedback. Yeah, feedback that moves learning forward, not backwards. So the feedback that is going to help the students to become better. And students need to be involved. And in order to be involved, we need to have peer and self-assessment. So those are the 5 core pillars of assessment for learning. But how is this mentioned into the cycle diagram? So remember, we're going to start with the learning outcomes. We are going to collect evidence. We need to give evidence, and okay, that evidence is going to help us get the feedback. When we've got that feedback, then we're going to make some adjustments, and the cycle is going to continue again. So assessment for learning is not more assessment like some people think. It is a better use of what we already do. So this is the idea, to think about that. Yeah. But we've been talking about evidence. So what do we mean by evidence? Yes, what is evidence? In your classroom, what counts as evidence of learning? Could you, is it possible that you write your answers in the chat box, please? Yeah? Okay, what is evidence? Evidence is an exam, it's a quiz, it's a presentation, etc. Yeah. But that is the traditional evidence. That is the evidence that we are used to. Yeah. So what is the evidence that we are going to get from assessment for learning? Okay. Let's see. In assessment for learning, the evidence that we're going to get is something that is observable. It's observable, and we are going to get during the learning process. And then it's going to help the teachers decide what to do. So it means that we have evidence all the time. So if that happens, how do we gather evidence without adding workload? Remember, assessment is workload. Now we're going to gather evidence. That gathering evidence is going to be more work. No. That's not what we think. This is not what is going to happen. Okay? What is going to happen is, how are we going to get this evidence of learning? First of all, we could ask questions that has a purpose. Purposeful questions. Then we are going to observe learning in a strategic way. We are going to collect quick student outputs. Okay, write a sentence, underline this, match this, etc. We're going to use peer and self-assessment. We could take notes in a selective way and I'm going to give you some tools with examples that could help you. Okay, so let's see. What have we got? Yeah, so I am going to show you 4 tools. Exit card, thinking routine, minute speaking, and self-checklist. And I'm going to show you that we could use the same tool for 3 different levels: primary, secondary, and university. Yeah. An exit card. This is something that exit ticket. Remember, this is what we normally call it. Yeah. For primary, no, we're going to ask, okay, tell me one thing you learned today. Good. For secondary, instead of asking, the students are going to write one sentence using the target language. And in the case of university, okay, or higher education, instead of asking for a sentence, instead of asking for a thing, then one key insight, okay, that they are taking from that. Look, same tool, different level. My second tool is thinking routines. In primary, I used to think, now I think. Okay. In secondary, I used to think, now I think because. So I'm giving a reason. And in the case of university, my thinking has shifted because of this. Same tool. Minute speaking is another tool. Yeah. Okay, tell me one new word. In secondary, okay, explain the ideas. In the case of university, okay, summarize and justify. And then checklist. This is another tool. Okay, self-checklist for primary, for secondary, and for university. It means, okay, that the same tool. The only thing is that we're increasing the depth of thinking in the students. Yes. Okay. I have mentioned 4 tools. Which tool would work best in your class tomorrow? This is something that you need to think about. But not only the tool, also the evidence that the tool is going to give you and how you are going to use that evidence. Okay, so the activity is not the core thing here. The most important thing here is the information that you are going to get and what you are going to do with that information. My recommendation is that you use different tools, okay? At the beginning of the school year, because I teach in school, I normally talk about school, okay, think about the exit card, the exit ticket, and then move on. That is going to give you ideas of what to do, okay? Now that we have the evidence, okay, and I have shown you, okay, ways of getting the evidence, what am I going to do with that evidence? Okay, what I'm going to do is I need to look at rubrics. Everybody talks about rubrics. Yes. But what are we going to do with those rubrics? We need to give the students feedback. How are we going to give the feedback? That feedback needs to be in action. It needs to be formative. It needs to be helpful. It needs to be memorable as well. Yes. So if we look at students' work, when you look at students' work, okay, what is the first thing you usually notice? I'm sure that you are going to write in the chat grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, or if it's an oral presentation, you are going to mention what? You are going to mention pronunciation problems, stress, intonation, etc. Yeah. So this is what that is the first thing that we usually notice, because this is the way we have been trained as teachers. Yes. So, and if I give you this traditional descriptor, Grammar, 3/5. Some errors that affect clarity. What does this tell the student to do next? Do you think that this is going to be helpful? Is this going to be formative? Am I moving forward? Or maybe what I'm simply doing is I'm telling the students that he or she is making errors and I can't clearly understand what he or she is saying. So those are the traditional things we do in assessment. Okay? So this is a traditional, or what I call the static rubric. Remember when I told you about being an auditor and moving into being a coach? Yeah, this traditional or static rubric is the audit style. So this is traditional. And traditional rubrics are the ones that are going to describe performance after learning. I'm sure that you show your rubrics to the students before. Yeah. But students need to internalize the rubric. My proposal is that we rethink rubrics. So we need to move from the traditional rubric, which is assessment of learning at the end of the school year, into dynamic rubrics, which is assessment or evidence for learning. So remember, traditional rubrics are the ones that judge learning. Dynamic rubrics are the ones that guide learning. And this is important. So dynamic rubrics are going to be used during the learning. They are going to focus on the learning process. They are going to be flexible. They are going to evolve. And they are going to make learning visible, which is something that the students need and want now. So if a rubric is a lens for learning, I think it must help us to see two things: what the students can already do and what the students need to do. What is my proposal today? For me, the natural solution is called the mission and the medal. What is the medal? The medal is the evidence of success. And what is the mission? Our next learning goal. This is not a rubric. This is a feedback strategy. Okay? Can I go back? Okay. I'm going to give you this example. Okay? I think school uniforms are good because the students look the same. If I'm going to use the strategy that I am proposing, the mission is use a linking word or add one more reason to strengthen the idea. The medal is that the opinion is clear and is supported with a reason. Yes. So every piece of information your students could produce, you could use this form of giving feedback. Mission and medal. Remember, medal is what the students have got, and the mission is what they need to do next. Yes. So if we have talked and you are familiar with two types of rubrics, which is traditional rubrics, okay? Remember, these are not rubrics. The mission and the medals are not rubrics. They are a way to give feedback to students, okay? Tell me, which of these approaches would you use? Could you go for the traditional one? Or would you go for the mission and the medal? And which rubric or which way, okay, is more likely to generate feedback that the students can actually use? Maybe some teachers are going to say, oh, the traditional one is going to give my students some sort of information. Yeah. But feedback that the students can actually use is the one from the medal, the mission, and the medal. Because the students are going to read or they are going to listen to the teacher telling, okay, this is what is correct. This is what you did right. But this is what you need to do in order to improve. Yeah? Mm-hmm. What else can we mention about this? Okay? Yeah. So look at this. Is this feedback? Yes, no, it depends. I'm giving you 4 pieces of information. Please read them and decide if this is feedback or not. And which feedback could be more effective, or maybe it's not effective at all. Statement number 1, level 3, clear structure, some errors. Is that feedback? Yeah, it is feedback, okay? But maybe not the adequate feedback. Second statement, next time add one example to support your idea. Is this feedback? Yes, this is feedback. And this is a little bit more constructive. Number 3, good effort, keep it up. Feedback? Yeah, but very general. Good effort in which area? In pronunciation, if I'm giving an oral presentation, in discourse management. Statement 4, you met 3 of the 4 criteria. Okay, which is that criteria? Okay, it's a little bit vague. So look, these are examples of feedback that come from teachers. They all come from teachers, from our colleagues. But then let's think a little bit if this is feedback or not, and how much they are going to help students, which is the most important thing. Okay. Remember, the feedback need to stick. That is the feedback that assessment for learning proposes. So the feedback needs to be directly linked to the learning intentions, directly linked. So always the students need to have very clear which is the success criteria that we are using. Feedback needs to move learning forward, okay? Next steps. Scores are not important, okay? Moving forward. It needs to be timely, and it needs to call for action. So give the feedback in such a way and in the exact time that the students could improve, if it is still possible. And when you give the feedback, it needs to activate learning responsibilities. So they need to read the feedback and they need to act on this. Yeah, some teachers normally say, yeah, but my students are not going to read the feedback. They are only going to be interested in the score. They are only going to be interested in the grade. Well, but then what is our role as teachers? We need to motivate. We need to help them. We need to teach them how to. That is another role that we need to keep. So let's move from the traditional comments that we always write, okay? Good structure, okay? Some grammar mistake, you made most of the criteria, and then move to assessment for learning feedback. So the frame that I am proposing is you are doing a good job with pronouns, but or to improve your oral production, you could watch more Netflix films, etc. But try to be specific. Name what is the next step and make it actionable. Call for action. So action is important. Mhm. Look, this is a traditional comment that appears. Your argument is clear, but it lacks depth and stronger support. Yeah. So if you read that feedback, you say, okay, that is adequate. But remember, am I really helping? Am I really helping my student? I am giving you two options that I consider could help my students improve. Your main claim is clear, but to add depth to your analysis, include one specific example or reference in each paragraph and explain how it supports your argument. Okay, I am saying this is correct, but if you want to improve, this is what you need to do. My option number two, my feedback option number two is your argument is clear. But ask yourself, reflect, what evidence would convince a reader who disagrees with me? Add one piece of evidence that answers that question. So it's reflective. I agree. Your work is correct, but more needs to be done. And that more that needs to be done is adding an example, okay, convincing a reader, giving more evidence, etc., etc. Yeah. So look, I'm moving from something a very traditional comment to something more assessment for learning. Yes. So, what are the practical strategies? Always use a mission and a medal sentence. You did well, but next try this. Okay? Whole class feedbacks. Okay, focus on the patterns, not on the papers. Okay, patterns. You identify that there's a problem with present perfect. Okay, go for the whole class. Live feedback. Well, the students are working. Yeah. Some teachers say, no, but I am going to stop the activity. Well, but then use a signal in order to stop the activity. And I'm sure that that signal that stops the activity and you give the feedback is going to be more helpful than getting the students go on with the work. Success criteria. Always highlight the success criteria. Focus on one target feedback. Today, I am going to focus on content. Today, I am going to focus on stress. Today, I'm going to focus on punctuation. So don't mix them. Don't overload your students. And don't overload yourself as well. What feedback is not? And I think it is important if you want to go for assessment for learning. Remember, feedback is not grades or scores. No. Feedback is not praise without direction. Feedback is not end of task comments only. Feedback is not teacher talk only. Feedback is something that we interact, that we can negotiate. And feedback is not focused on the learner as a person, okay? Yes, be careful with this. Student, that's it, okay? Yeah. These are my references, but before I go for the references, okay, I am going to tell something else, okay? Yes. What are you going to do next? Starting tomorrow or starting on Monday, okay? First of all, the first thing that you need to do is you need to look at evidence of learning. What the students say, what the students write, or what the students do, not the grade. Identify one medal. What the evidence shows students can already do. When you have the medal, choose the mission. My next learning step is only one by one. okay? Give one sentence of feedback. Students don't need to read lines after lines of feedback. No, that's not correct. Remember, sometimes our students, they don't like to read, okay? They are more interested in the grades or in the comments, okay? Yes. Finally, use the evidence to decide what to teach next, because assessment informs instructions. Remember, grades, okay, summarize learning, but evidence is going to improve learning. So don't think that assessment is a separate event that happens at the end of the learning process. No, it is part of everyday classroom interaction. Collect those pieces of evidence in every time that is possible, because those pieces of information, those pieces of evidence are going to guide you, are going to guide your decisions about teaching, about feedback, and about support. And you need to make those small adjustments, and those adjustments are going to be the ones that are going to have a very significant impact on how students learn. Remember, when we focus on evidence, feedback stops being the end of learning, and it is going to become the beginning of the next step. And which is the beginning of the next step? To help our students improve. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very sorry about all these inconveniences about the camera, but I hope that this information about, remember, the strategy is important, the mission and the method. That's the one that we're proposing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Esther, for such insightful session. Yeah, your experience definitely showed through the whole session that you presented, especially regarding classroom-based assessment. Now we have a few minutes for some questions that our audience has been sharing with us. I would like to start with one that is asking, what is the right time to provide feedback, if there is such right time?
I don't think there is a right time to provide feedback. Oh, see. So I think that feedback needs to be provided when it is necessary and when it arises. So sometimes teachers, we feel that we need to give feedback at the end of the session. I don't think so. I think that we need to give feedback when it is necessary, okay? But we need to clarify what is feedback and what is praise, because this is different, okay? So praise could be every moment, but feedback is because the students have produced something, okay? Correct or incorrect, but then we need to give them some sort of feedback. Something clear, something short, but something that calls for action.
Right, and this is a follow-up idea that I'm tempting at this moment, that you speak about the importance of feedback. I'm pretty sure that you have mentioned, or you would also mention, the importance of monitoring students' response to that feedback. Right, that seems to be the logical chain of actions expected to improve learning, or to incorporate assessment for learning, because, as you said, feedback will not be effective if it doesn't reach any reaction, or if there is no action taken upon that feedback that you're sharing. Is there any additional thought you would like to share there?
Yes, William. The thing is that we teachers, okay, we need to change our perception of assessment. think that grades, scores, maybe they are necessary in traditional scenarios, summative assessment. But, okay, feedback is more than that. Feedback is as assessment, okay? Assessment comes from a Latin word that means assidere, which means I need to sit with you. I need to sit with you, student, and I need to talk to you, and I need to explain what are your methods and what is your mission. Yeah. So the idea is to have it as often as possible, and if I consider as a teacher that it needs to be done privately, I go for that. But if the feedback that I'm going to give my students is going to help the group, I will give it in a choral way, okay? In a group way. Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very important that you mentioned that feedback is not necessarily a one-on-one feedback provided from teacher to student, but it could also be group feedback, right? Yes, and definitely in that line of thought, or considering this need that you posed on rethinking assessment, there's a question from Pedro Torres that might trigger some reflection from your part. How can we rethink the assessment when the Currículo Nacional in Peru has this sort fixed competencies and skills and indicators that teachers have to meet? What can you say about that?
I definitely agree with Pedro, okay? In most educational settings, okay, like for example in Peru, because of the Curriculum Nacional, summative assessments and grades are necessary because they are going to serve reporting and certification. But assessment for learning does not replace the system. I think that is going to complement the system. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather evidence through the learning process. And then the students are going to be better prepared for those final assessment or those summative assessment that the government or the curriculum ask us to complete. Yeah. So we're not replacing, we're simply complementing.
Right, thank you. Yeah, you clearly set out this differentiation that exists in terms of the purpose of assessment, right? Assessment and evaluation in general have different dimensions, and one of those purposes are purely administrative purposes, which would be what they see at the level of school administration, no, the centralized system.
Yeah.
But what you presented was basically not assessment with the administrative view, but with the learning support purpose, no assessment for learning, as you very well named it. Yes, thank you for that, Maria Esther.
Yes, so that is the idea, William. The idea is that we move, from that's what it's called rethinking assessment. Okay, don't think in assessment just in grades, scores, etc., but move forward. That's what it's thinking. Okay. Yes.
Yes, and I have a few more questions here that I would like to share. I guess still time is a bit friendly with us. Regardless the problems that we had at the beginning, I guess we still have some minutes.
Yeah, no problem.
How can teachers implement assessment for learning as they also shared at the initial reactions to your questions, to your triggering questions? How can teachers implement assessment for learning if they are already overwhelmed by grading and this administrative work that we just discussed?
Yeah, I think that's an important concern that most teachers have. And I think in reality, the goal is the opposite. Assessment for learning focuses on using the evidence that is already emerging during the lessons, questioning short written response, discussion, etc. So this evidence does not necessarily require additional grading, okay? What we need to do is we need to collect the evidence, we need to record the evidence, and then we are going to use that evidence in a more with a more intentionally way, as sources of evidence. Yeah. So it means that not every evidence that I collect from students need to be graded. Yeah. So it means that at the end, I'm going to have, for example, at the end of the term, I'm going to have maybe 5, 6, or 7 different sources of evidence, and then I could give an assessment, and I could give the feedback, the required feedback. That's what I mean. Yeah, I don't think that we need to feel overwhelmed when something is new. Yeah, we always react, but my proposal is that teachers try. Okay, why don't you try? And then you are going to feel that you're not going to feel overwhelmed. I'm not saying that you are going to feel completely relaxed or relieved. No. Little by little, you are going to get used to collecting evidence. Okay. And that evidence is going to serve like your portfolio that would help you to prepare your feedback and your scores and the assessment that the government or the Curriculum Nacional ask us to do.
Thank you, Marista. Building up on what you just mentioned, making this call to not to be overwhelmed to our colleagues that are attending this session. Could you share, I know that your session has been filled with practical ideas and applications of assessment for learning, but could you share with us one more simple strategy that teachers could start using tomorrow to apply assessment for learning? Maybe one more idea that you could share.
Yeah, well, the 4 that I mentioned today are the ones that are the most used, if we want to call it like that, okay? Yeah. And if you want to start with assessment for learning, I suggest that teachers start using the exit ticket or the exit card. Yeah. And then, because the activity only takes like 2 or 3 minutes to develop, and that evidence is going to be evidence that is going to be valuable. Okay, that takes us to the concept of metacognition as well. Yeah, so those aspects of metacognitions that are also important to be dealt with. Yes, so start one by one, little by little. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And there is one more question from our participants in the chat. It says, how can teachers collect evidence of learning in large classrooms? Can you share some ideas on that?
Yeah. Okay. What I normally do with a large class is I make like a plan. And I say, okay, today is Monday, and I am going to collect evidence from my right-hand side. Okay. So I focus on the students that are sitting on the right-hand side. Okay. Then on Wednesday, I'm going to focus on the ones that are on my left-hand side. And then on Friday, I'm going to do that with the ones that are in the center or in the middle of the class. Yeah, because a large class, if we could talk about maybe public schools, a large class could be like 40 students or maybe 45 or more. Yeah. So you need to go by sectors. You need to go by sections. Yes. So that is the best way. And you also need to decide what kind of evidence you are going to get and in which skill and in which competencia you want to do that. Yeah. So you need to have some documents prepared before the session. Yeah, but divide your class into sectors, and that is going to help you. That's my advice.
Thank you. One last question. I promise this is going to be the last one, Marista.
No problem, no problem.
Okay. You mentioned that formative assessment sometimes resorts to informal evidence, or as a practice, it resorts to informal evidence. How can teachers make sure that evidence can meet the requirements of being reliable and fair?
Yeah. The goal is not to make a final judgment based on one moment. That's what I said before, that we need to collect evidence in different moments. And that evidence that I'm going to collect is going to develop a complete picture of the learning across several opportunities. Yeah. So if I only think that collecting evidence is once in the term, that is not assessment for learning. The idea is that I try to collect as much evidence as possible. But I'm not saying 20 pieces. I'm talking about a fair number, a reasonable number. Yes. So multiple pieces of evidence over time, not relying only on a single observation. Because if I rely on a single observation, then the results are not going to be reliable and fair. Yeah. And remember, we are not taking the requirements of assessment, okay? Reliability, validity, practicality, etc. Those still exist there. So we are simply talking about how to make this more like personal, if you want. More, we're coaching the students. That's what we want.
Nicely explained. Thank you. Thank you, Marista. I want to second one of the participants who says that it's a pity we cannot see you on the screen, but
Sorry.
we hear you, Marista. That's the most important thing. Thank you once again for closing our final session today with such wisdom and inspirational presence of yours.
Okay.
To all the ELT Week community, on behalf of the British Council, thank you for your energy, your participation. Well, now it's time for you to go and rest well. We'll see you tomorrow morning for another day of the ELT Week Peru 2026. Thank you again. Thank you, Marista. See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.